Hello, and welcome back to History Overlooked. Today's episode is on Thomas Paine, a hero of the Civil War. Or maybe not, you'll have to find out. Please enjoy.
Thomas Paine, born February 9th, 1737, was an English-born American political activist and revolutionary. He authored Common Sense and the American Crisis, two of the most influential pamphlets at the start of the American Revolution. He helped inspire the Patriots in 1776 to declare independence from Great Britain. His ideas reflected Enlightenment-era ideals of transnational human rights.
Born in Thetford, Norfolk, Paine emigrated to the British American colonies in 1774 with the help of Benjamin Franklin, arriving just in time to participate in the American Revolution. Virtually every rebel read or listened to a reading of his 47-page pamphlet, Common Sense, proportionally the all-time best-selling American title, which catalyzed the rebellious demand for independence from Great Britain. The American Crisis was a pro-revolutionary pamphlet series.
Paine lived in France for most of the 1790s, becoming deeply involved in the French Revolution. While in England, he wrote The Rights of Man, in part a defence of the French Revolution against its critics. His attacks on Anglo-Irish conservative writer Edmund Burke led to a trial and conviction and a censure in England in 1792 for the crime of seditious libel. Paine has a claim to the title, the Father of the American Revolution, which rests on his pamphlets, especially Common Sense, which crystallised sentiment for independence in 1776. It was published in Philadelphia on January the 10th, 1776, and signed anonymously by an Englishman. It was an immediate success, quickly spreading 100,000 copies in 3 months to near 2 million residents of 13 colonies. During the course of the American Revolution, a total of about 500,000 were sold, including unauthorized editions. Paine's original title for the pamphlet was Plain Truth, but Paine's friend, pro-independent advocate Benjamin Rush, suggested Common Sense instead. Finding a printer who was daring enough to commit his print shop to the printing of Common Sense was not easy. At the advice of Benjamin Rush, Paine commissioned Robert Bell to print his work.
Undeterred by the government campaign to discredit him, Paine issued his Rights of Man, Part the Second, combining principle and practice in February 1792. It detailed a representative government with enumerated social programs to remedy the numbing poverty of commoners through progressive tax measures, radically reduced in price to ensure unprecedented circulation. It was sensational in its impact and gave birth to reformed societies. An indictment for seditious libel followed for both publisher and author, while government agents followed Paine and instigated mobs, hate meetings and burnings in effigy. A fierce pamphlet war also resulted, in which Paine was defended and assailed in dozens of works. The authorities aimed, with ultimate success, to chase Paine out of Great Britain. He was then tried in absentia and found guilty, although never executed. The French translation of Rights of Man, Part 2, was published in April 1792. The translator, François Lanthesinas, eliminated the dedication to Lafayette, as he believed Paine thought too lightly of Lafayette, who was seen as a royalist sympathiser at the time.
Paine's enthusiastic support of the French Revolution was granted with an honorary French citizenship, alongside prominent contemporaries such as Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and others. Paine's honorary citizenship was in recognition of the publishing of his Rights of Man, Part 1 and 2, and the sensation it created within France. Despite his inability to speak French, he was elected to the National Convention, representing the district of Calais. Paine wrote the second part of Rights of Man on a desk in Thomas Cleo Rickman's house, with whom he was staying in 1792, before he fled to France. This desk is currently on display in the People's Histories Museum in Manchester, if you wish to see it.
On the morning of June 8th, 1809, Paine died, aged 72, at 59 Grove Street in Greenwich Village, New York City. Although the original building no longer exists, the present building has a plaque noting that Paine died at this location. After his death, Paine's body was brought to New Rock Hill, but the Quakers would not allow it to be buried in their graveyard as per his last will. so his remains were buried under a walnut tree on his farm. In 1819, English-Hungarian radical journalist William Cobell, who in 1793 had published a hostile continuation of Francis Alde's George Chalmers' The Life of Thomas Paine, dug up his bones and transported them back to England with the intention to give Paine a heroic burial on his native soil, but this never came to pass. The bones were still among Cobbett's effects when he died over 15 years later, but were later lost. There is no confirmed story about what happened to them after that, though various people have claimed throughout the years to own parts of Paine's remains, such as his skull and right hand.
At the time of his death, most American newspapers reprinted the obituary notice from the New York Evening Post that was in turn quoting from the American Citizen, which read, "He had lived long, did some good and much harm." Only 6 mourners came to his funeral, 2 of whom were black, most likely freedmen. Many years later, the writer and orator Robert G. Ingleson wrote, "Thomas Paine had passed the legendary limit of life. One by one, most of his old friends and acquaintances had deserted him. Maligned on every side, execrated, shunned and abhorred, his virtues denounced as vices, his services forgotten, his character blackened. He preserved the poise and balance of his soul. He was a victim of the people, but his convictions remained unshaken. He was still a soldier in the army of freedom and still tried to enlighten and civilize those who impatiently waited for his death. Even those who loved their enemies hated him, their friend, the friend of the whole world with all their hearts. On the 8th of June 1809, death came. Death almost his only friend. At his funeral, no pomp, no pageantry, no civic procession, and no military display. In a carriage, a woman and her son who had lived on the bounty of the dead, on horseback, a Quaker, the humanity of whose dominated the creed of his head, and following on foot 2 black men filled with gratitude, constituted the funeral cortege of Thomas Paine.
Wow, that was truly epic. Well done for making it this far. If you liked it, subscribe, like, hit the notification bell, and follow on Instagram. I think that deserves a round of applause. That was fantastic. That was impeccable.
Alright. Right, it's like that. It smells of marijuana in here.
No, it doesn't.
It does a bit. I've not watched Hamilton.
You're a phobia. I never watched that.
I don't know.
Good.
Got the hood. Oh, like M&M.
Fucking stop with the M&M.
Born in Thetford, Norfolk.
Thetford!
So we're on an indiciment.
Radically reduced.
Whatever.
Oh wait, no.
I might as well just do indiciment because
Yeah, I suppose go from
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. An indiciment for.
No!
This is French.
It's not French.
Indictment. Seditious libel.
Okay, do you want to perform it in an actual thing?
Okay.
I'm not putting that in the fucking video.
An indictment for seditious libel followed.
Well, I'm doing it.
No, hold on, that was.